share with you an interview I did with 4 siblings, so 2 brothers, 2 sisters, who have started an online business together on YouTube, and it's been very successful for them. They're doing very well. I've known these I kind of want to call them kids, but they're not kids anymore. These young adults. I met them. They were still kind of kids. They were still I think the youngest was still in junior high, and they were high school. The oldest was just coming out of high school when I first met them. And so they're all out of high school now, and the 4 of them started a business together. And I'm really fascinated by watching this family. The Skorys is the name, because it's not often that I see 2 brothers, 2 sisters, all, and they're the only 4 kids in the family, all working together right out of through high school and then out of high school. Not only just the entrepreneurship that it takes, but the communication and the conflict resolution, and it's just a different story than what I'm used to seeing, which is where kids grow up, they go different directions, and they kind of only see each other around holidays. And even then, it's not really that, they're kind of like, okay, that was done. Good. See you next year. And so I wanted to talk with the Skorys about is one, tell me the story of the business. How did you guys get started doing this together? But more importantly, I wanted to hear, what's the dynamic between you guys, both growing up? What happened what did your parents do while you guys were kids? And what kind of environments did they create, and what things are you guys just doing to make a business be a fruitful endeavor for all of you together, mostly relationally? What are the key principles that's holding them together and making it possible for them to work together as they spent their entire childhood together, and now they're spending their adulthood together in this business? So, and I also wanted to know what advice they have for me and other parents who are trying to foster an environment of siblings who work well together, both before graduation and also after graduation, fostering environment of entrepreneurship, cooperation, and just kind of how does it work for you guys to work together? So it was a really, really good conversation for me to have with them. I walked away from this conversation feeling inspired, feeling motivated, feeling like I had a few more tools under my belt for how I can create an environment in my family with my kids now while they're young that would, even if they don't start to do business together, at least they have the types of relationships where they want to be around to get each other and they work well together. If that translates into a business one day, that's great. But even just right now, how does that work? What does that look like? And so it was a really good conversation for me to have. I'm really glad I recorded it, and I'm really glad the Skorys even took the time to sit down and do this conversation. So let me share that recording with you guys here, and links to all their stuff are down in the show notes if you want to check them out. But I really hope that the stories that they tell here really motivate you and encourage you and equip you to create environments that are good for fostering positive relationships between siblings, as well as business relationships as well, if that chooses to happen between them one day. So it's really good. I'll stop blabbing. Here you go. Skorys, hello.
Hello.
So good to see you guys.
Tim.
Early in the morning here at Clamor Live. I really love your guys' story in terms of what you guys have built all together, all 4 of you. Let's start with just making some introductions. Just tell us your name. And you guys have different roles. I don't even know. You have different titles in the business?
Yeah.
Okay, well, you go first.
We don't have necessarily official titles. I'd say I take on probably more of the leadership at the very top of the triangle role. But my name's Tyler. I'm also the oldest of the 4 Skorys siblings, which is all of us. We'll jump in order, but
okay.
Next.
My name is Eden. I am the youngest Skorys member, and I like to think that I take on a bit more of the creative side of the business. I really love anything that I can be hands-on creative with, so drawing, designing, social media stuff, even just set design. That's kind of where I thrive the most.
Cool.
My name's Cole. I am 22. I'm the 3rd oldest Skorys sibling.
Middle child.
Yeah. And in terms of roles, the one role I specifically take on is the merchandising.
Oh, okay.
So I handle pretty much everything from point A to point B for merchandising.
Sourcing, fulfilling.
Yeah, and then the website and shipping out orders, new products, etc.
Okay.
And then I'm Gabriella. I am the second oldest, and I take on a lot of the creative roles as well, really helping come up with like plot lines and a lot more on-screen camera work, being on like about just side channels we have, and also just kind of like a lot of management with a couple of like remote employees that we have, kind of really like making sure that like the workflow is staying moving throughout the week.
And Tyler, what role do you typically play?
So I'd say a lot more the creative side when it comes to our videos. So background for our channel is very heavily scripted adventure vlogs aimed at a younger tween audience. So there's a lot of moving parts to that because as we've built out the company, it's been more than just the YouTube videos. It's been trying to extend that into a brand and keep it cohesive as we move outside of YouTube and into other verticals. So trying to keep all of that aligned and set the direction for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So kind of like CEO type of stuff. Would anyone else say that or just okay? Cool. You're like, well, we don't like trying to go to his head, but
It felt like, you know, like we tried for a little while. We did like kind of just be like, oh, like everything's like completely like 25, 25, 25, like just like really like, oh, everything's good. Everyone has equal say. We'll all just kind of do it. And that just didn't really work. So that's when we're kind of like, okay, as the oldest, like you're just gonna take on more responsibility, and that's just like the way it's gonna flow within the company.
And did you lean into that naturally? Just kind of your firstborn?
Yeah, that was definitely like a big discussion point because it was at the very start one of the issues that was probably the largest issue that like we've had to face as a company is trying to figure out that structure and how that fit. And I think finally the conclusion that we came to was just between the background that I had starting it and moving into it, but since then also they've just taken up so much more responsibility as they've gotten older that it's really come together as a company and like the way that, you know, we've kind of intended from the start, but they were probably too young to be able to step into that role. So I think they've grown into it a lot more as well. It's been, like, again, they started when they were
12.
Yeah,
12. I was just turning 12, so I was like right on the cusp of 11. And I mean, honestly, at that time, I thought nothing of it. I was like, all right, cool, pull out a camera, let's make a video once a week. So I'm doing that at room, and Tyler's over here with like this master plan, and he's like, we gotta make our YouTube channel, like we gotta get in here, we gotta slide in there, and I'm like, okay, filming, yeah.
He's like, my 12-year-old sister, I just feel like she's not taking this as seriously
as she exactly. He's like, the drive isn't there, the passion isn't there.
And even just like jumping forward a little bit, like even just like once we'd been doing it for a couple years, they were still 16, 17, and they were in our early 20s, like, hey, like this is like going to become our career, and they're like, we're not even out of high school yet. Like we want to go hang out with our friends, and we're like, we have a filming schedule.
You don't have friends. We are your friends.
Right, I know. It was hard. It was like, you know, balancing that school and film, because as it started getting more serious, that was definitely a struggle that I had in high school. It was very difficult. I was a lot of times flustered. I was like, I can't film. I can't do school. Like I gotta pick one or the other. So like I remember being literally in between shoots that we were filming, and I'd have like my textbooks, try to cram in some work, and then be like, all right, Eden, you're up, and you know, be like, all right, here we go. And the second I graduated, it just felt like the biggest weight off my shoulders.
Oh, really?
I was like, this is it. I'm ready to jump into this. Like finally I can give it my all.
So you were excited about it by that point?
I was so excited. Okay. Yeah. For a while, freshman and sophomore year, I was pretty convinced. I was like, all right, I'm going to college. Like, I was homeschooled. I need to, like, see what school is like. And then junior year, once we started getting more serious, I kind of was like, well, like, this is kind of looking pretty good. You know, like, this isn't looking too shabby. And senior year, I just was counting down the days to graduate, so I could do it full time.
I'm supposed to go to college to get a career, but I already have one. So.
Right. And that's what kind of my thing was. I was like, well, college isn't going anywhere. So if I want to go to school in 5 years, I can go to school in 5 years.
Yeah.
If I go to school now and push away YouTube, then like it could be something that I regretted, let it go down, and then I'm like, well, gotta start over.
And plus, it's expensive. College is
crazy
expensive.
Yes.
Very
and
expensive.
We're already making like, you know, twice the amount of tuition. It's like, why am I gonna, you know, take out loans for that and go into it, you know, a degree I potentially won't use
Exactly.
later.
Yeah, I
in
haven't
life.
used my degree in over a decade.
Yeah, neither of our
Neither
parents
of our
have.
parents,
None
like-
of our friends. Like they paid all of 4 or 5 years
Yeah.
of school, and then they're
Yeah.
like, I think I want to go into dog grooming or something. That's a true story. We had a friend who got like a huge degree.
Sorry, friend.
Yeah,
So we
sorry.
threw you under the bus.
And then they just switched into like training dogs.
Yeah. So tell me, I want to hear more about the conflict resolution because I think that's really
Yeah.
important as a dad myself with 7 kids. I want to hear from you guys about that. But tell, for people who don't know the backstory, we kind of just jumped right into it. How did you guys get started and where are we today with
Right.
the business and the channel and everything?
Okay, so at the start, we were getting into YouTube at the point where people were just starting to make money. So
And what year is this approximately?
was probably
2012.
2012.
February 2012.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's when we started the Skorys. You
Right.
guys were making videos on
just to kind
Right.
of
That was at
on
just
our own.
at that point. It was just more like
Playing
fun. Like it was still the early stages of YouTubers. Like, oh, things are fun. But around 2012, it was like starting to come out. Like, oh, like people are actually making money doing this. So we definitely went into it like, okay, like this could actually be a like business opportunity
Right,
for
like
us. Like
this
we
could-
could actually do something here.
So you were you went into it with a business
which,
mindset.
Yes.
which is different because I feel like there's a generation of YouTubers before us that love to say, oh, we just did this as a hobby. We had no idea
Right.
this was going to turn into
It was
a
an
job.
accident that we became so rich off of YouTube. Like,
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
go in it if you're gonna try to
Yeah,
make
yeah.
money. Like,
Which I also want to put this out there because that always annoyed me just a little bit because I was very much under the mindset that like I wanted my career to be something that I was passionate about. Like I saw both my parents struggle with their enjoyment and their jobs that I was like, okay, I'm not going to do this from, the time I graduate to the time I retire behind a desk, not enjoying, living life. I'm like, I want this really fun life. I saw these YouTubers starting to come up, and when they were mentioning, oh, we're getting paid to do this, the first YouTuber I remember who hit 1 million subscribers was Fred.
Yeah, I remember Fred. Forgot about Fred, but yes, now. Yeah.
The backbones of our.
I know.
And I remember at the time seeing some of the other smaller YouTubers crossing like the 100,000 subscriber threshold, and
Yeah.
it was just crazy to me in my head that I'm like, okay, that's 100,000 people there. And then once I knew that it was connected to AdSense, so it was just starting to be a thing at that point. So I'm like, okay, well, what if we try to jump into this? And at the time it felt like it was too late. There's a part of it that I'm like, okay, they're already so much bigger and blah blah blah. But I'm like, let's just start like throwing together videos. Let's see what we can do. At this point, we had already kind of been making videos just as
A hobby.
siblings.
Yeah.
And we had already put a couple on YouTube for our family and friends to watch,
Yeah.
and those kind of had some residual traffic. But at that point, I was about to graduate. So
High school?
High school, yeah. So I remember specifically I was taking a vacation with my grandparents. So my grandparents are big travelers. So we had gone on a cruise for a month. Like, it's a really long time to be away. And it was kind of right before I was supposed to come back and then go to school. So we had buffered up a couple videos. It was like our first 5 weeks of videos that we had buffered up. And I just scheduled those for when I was out of town.
Yeah.
And I was expecting to come back and like have, like 10,000 subscribers. And it took us about like a year to, I think, hit 1,000 subscribers
Yeah.
at the start. Like
That's,
it's
yeah.
very slow.
Yeah.
And after we'd hit 1,000 subscribers, I started going to my first year of like college.
Oh, okay. So you're the dog grooming one then.
Then I
Like,
dropped
quote,
out. I
unquote,
decided I wanted to go.
Yeah, right. Using an alias.
Yeah. Some friend we don't know about.
So I went in for like TV and video production because I was like, okay, that makes the most sense. And the environment for me just was not it. I felt like it was very stifling creatively, and it was really hard to, I feel like, find people that shared the same passion and drive that I did, especially because I was going to a community college. And basically I sat down with my parents and I was like, I need a year to like focus on YouTube. Like
Yeah.
I can't keep trying to do both of these. Like I need to be 100% all in. And me being the oldest, that was like the first conversation that had come up with that.
Really?
It's like a record scratch on the table. Like, no college? What is that?
So
And my mom also was already like my dad homeschooled us. My mom
Yeah.
didn't homeschool
Your whole
us.
lives, right? Like,
My whole life,
So
yeah.
college is your first day of school,
Yeah.
just
Right.
like me.
So
Yeah.
my mom was always like, she just loved that we were homeschooled, but she had that kind of like fear that like we were missing out on like
She's
the
also pretty
traditional high school
traditional, yeah.
experience.
Or
Really?
even just schooling experience.
So her like hope, saving grace at the end of us being homeschooled was that we were all going to go to college.
Yeah.
Like,
And then
we
you're
were gonna
like, I want to
have-
work at home by myself.
Exactly. Like, she's like, you're going to go, you're going to have the college experience. Like, it's going to be so much fun because, she had a great college experience. So she wanted us to have that. So when the conversation came, it was like, oh, we're not going to do that. Like, she definitely was like
Really?
freaked out. Like, she
Wow.
was like, what do you mean? And not just to even be like, a gap year to go travel the world. Like, it was
Yeah.
like, I'm going to do this new thing that they've never heard of.
Yeah.
And like, we're starting a career in an
On
up and coming
YouTube, yeah.
social media website. And they're like, what?
I feel like it's the equivalent. Like I try to think of it now, but like if like I had kids and they were like, okay, I just want to do like TikTok full time, like I would probably like freak out in the same way. Be like, okay, well at least do
That might be
YouTube.
legitimate,
Like,
though.
Yeah, TikTok is a little different.
Because
Yeah,
we have some
TikTok,
history there.
Yeah.
Not much, but enough.
Well, I'm more meant in the bad way.
Yeah.
TikTok full time.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, it was definitely scary for them and my mom in particular. But she was like, okay, a year people take a gap year off. I think in her head she could justify that.
Oh, okay. She's
So-
like, he'll come around.
Exactly.
That year will end and he'll be right back in
Yeah.
that classroom.
So I went like hard that year.
Yeah.
Like, I was like, okay, we're posting 3 times a week. And I was doing like all-nighters editing these videos. Like,
Yeah.
it was,
And you're at like every conference I was at too. So
Yes.
you guys are traveling.
That's
Yeah,
when I dived
I
into
remember
YouTube. I was
that.
like, I need to learn everything.
I
That
think you
there
were
is.
the first channel I remember Tyler telling us about. It's
Oh,
like
mine?
there's this website, video
thank you.
creators.
Oh yeah, we all read like the.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was
Better
just telling you
YouTube.
guys yesterday. I think you guys were like one of the Kickstarter. That wasn't Kickstarter. It was called TubeStart back then.
Yeah.
Tubes,
But yeah.
And we also,
First
that's
learners.
where we met Jonathan. and-
Yeah.
Because I remember we had like saved up enough to go to like VidCon, and that was like our first like we had like the creator like pass. And we were
Not
so
even all of
excited.
us.
Yeah,
It was just, it was
just
Tyler
the two
and
of us.
Gabriella.
So I feel a little bitterness coming out.
Oh, there was a little. I was like, what? You're going to California
Without me?
to
Yeah.
represent the family channel with only half of us
On
there.
Spirit,
Without me.
nonetheless, so they really
we
took
took
on
a Spirit red eye from Michigan
yeah.
to California to get there. So we were
It's dedication.
Anything
That's
like
the
that.
non-sexy side of all the stuff that nobody
Oh
sees.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember Tyler was like calling us, and he was like, "I'm at every single panel. I've got like my notebook full of
Yeah,
notes."
we split
and-
up so we could hit like every panel, and then like we were like recording it. We were like taking all these notes, and we came back and we were like, "What did you learn at your panel? What did you learn at my panel?" And like we just like.
Why did you
went
guys want it
through.
so bad?
I think
There's also like a very competitive aspect of us too, where like when we want to go for something, like we don't do
Yeah,
it
no kidding.
half-heartedly. We do it 100% all the way because it's just something that we really want.
I
And
think also for a big part of it too was like we always loved the idea of kind of being like a figure in people's life and kind of like not necessarily an inspiration but just this outlet for people. So even in that small group of people, seeing those comments just saying like, "You made my day was so terrible and now it's so much better." We started off with comedy originally, so like they were like, "I needed this today, I needed a laugh," and it just felt so good. And we were like, "All right, more people. Like who can we
Yeah.
give a better day? Like who can we be to their
I
outlet?"
think it was also like a do or die sort of thing too.
Yeah.
It's like, well, it's either going to work, like he had a year to do it. So
Yeah.
like
I think I honestly, for me personally, and I'm sure there are different reasons, but I don't know. For me, there was a huge fear of ending up behind a desk. Like I just did not want to have a desk job, and I think it honestly was because like both my parents like really did struggle with like that sort of trying to find like, especially my dad trying to homeschool us at the same time he was also working, so that's a lot to juggle, and I just always felt like there's other options out there that this could work. And I watched also my grandparents, like I said, they were big travelers, but he did the exact same thing where he worked his entire life, and once he was finally able to retire at 60 or whatever, he did a bunch of travel. But his life didn't last that long after he was able to travel, and I just felt like that could have just been, stretched out had you rearranged some things, and you could have I didn't want to do that path.
Yeah.
So I think in my head it was those are the two options. It was I saw this new emerging career. I was like, okay, if we jump into this right now, if we get in early enough, then we'll be able to live this life of being able to travel, being able to have these fun adventures together.
Flexibility,
right.
less
and
restricting.
Then make more money than I would be doing if I was, because at the same time I was also juggling. If this didn't work out, I was going to go into web design and development.
Okay.
So literally sitting at a desk behind a computer for hours at a time.
But it could be in your living room, maybe. So was it the fear? And I want to be careful how I say this because I don't want to say something that's not being said, but let me say my story, just briefly, because I think this is what I'm identifying with. I grew up in an environment where I saw the things about my parents' careers that I didn't want, and I didn't like, and I heard the stories sitting around dinner table and blah, 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 and I was like, oh, I want to make sure that just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So is that kind of where you guys, you're reacting to? Okay.
I think also too, we, growing up, my dad definitely, as we were homeschooled, really gave us the flexibility to incorporate into our day-to-day lives growing up, things that we were extraordinarily passionate about. So versus going to high school and being you have to do these 5 classes every single day, no matter what, it was we each had a tailored curriculum to what we really loved and doing. So for Tyler, he spent a lot of time working on web development and web design.
In high school?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Versus for me, I spent a lot more time on creative writing and the creative side of things, and was very involved in our community and organizing things. I worked at the dance studio. So I was always really a creative person. So the thought of being oh my gosh, we could, if we work hard enough, have this job where we get to be in charge, where we're the ones managing everything, where we get to be the creative ones. We don't have to answer to somebody else's creativity or, do their own idea of something. If we were to be on a TV show, you're still answering to so many people, the networks, everything.
Yeah.
We could make our own thing and have this be ours. So I think that really was just what really kept us going. That drive was the possibility of we could do this. It seems so crazy and so far out there, but there's
that's
that
what
hope.
captured your attention.
Yeah, it was that hope, that sparkle of oh my gosh, wait, but it would be so amazing if we can do this.
So at what point it sounds like it started with your vision, and I want to kind of move forward to where we are today, some of the things I want to talk about too, but it sounds like you then Gabriella caught the vision next.
Yeah.
And then who got it?
Probably me. I think it probably went.
In age order.
Okay, so age order.
Because I still got a little pushback from my mom as I was graduating high school. Again, it was more for the social aspect. Which
by the point it got to him, it was purely social. She's please just take any class, any class. I need to love God. I want you to just go see other people in the classroom.
Or just go talk to the neighbors or something.
Well, especially because at that time, that was when we had moved from Michigan to Arizona. Mm-hmm. So it was a brand new state. We already didn't know anyone.
So her fear was even heightened even more.
Exactly. So at least before, kind of our saving grace in Michigan was we were part of this really big community theater.
You're screwing up all your mom's plans, guys.
I know. We had
Isn't that how it
tons.
always goes?
We did, and she loved that we had tons of friends there, social gatherings, and then we moved to Arizona, and she's oh my God, you guys don't know anyone.
Get off the internet.
Yeah, take a class.
So I ended up taking a class, and I chose the wrong one to meet new people. It was at our community college.
Tinder 101.
And it was a audio engineering class for mixing.
Oh, and you ended up in editing base.
The kids were so weird. The weirdest kids was Mom, I don't like any of these people anyways. But that was it. And then I was off to the horse race.
I remember when I graduated, I literally so Tyler was no, you gotta go to college. Gabrielle was yeah, take some classes. Cole was please take a class. I remember I literally graduated, closed my textbook, and I was I graduated. And my mom was all right, have a good day at work. You're full time now. Get to it. What are you doing? That's gonna be amazing.
That was kind of, I was at camp. I was a camp counselor when my senior graduation. The homeschool convention of Pennsylvania had a homeschool graduation.
Okay.
And I was valedictorian, whatever that means. I don't even know how you figure that out at a homeschool graduation. But it was 200-300 kids graduating, which I knew none of them. And so I remember having to leave camp to go to this stupid I'm like, I don't want to go to graduation. Like, I just got to go back to school again in the fall anyway. It's just like, so I kind of had that same attitude. So give me an idea of the scope of where the business is at now, however you guys want to do that, and then I'll move into some sibling stuff.
Yeah. So now it's definitely at the point, where this is our full-time job for all four of us, and one full-time employee who works, he's part-time, but works with us 3 times. And very large group of freelancers that we work
contractors.
with. Contractors. And then we work with tons of brands on a regular basis.
We've got writers.
For sponsorships for the channel.
Sponsorships.
We're also set up for our future as well. So all of us are like heavily investing. We have accounts
individually.
Everyone has their personal like Roth IRAs and retirement funds. So
cool.
We're making sure that when we're 50.
And what's the channel at now?
So on YouTube we have 1.8 million followers. And
I remember you guys had like 10, less than 10.
I know.
When we first met VidCon, like whatever that was.
Almost 2 gold plaques. Gabriella's very close to 1 million.
Yeah,
on her
I have
channel.
a second channel.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Very close to 1 million on that.
Wow.
1 gold plaque, and then
Are they involved in that, or is that just you?
That's just me.
Okay.
I do on that one.
She's like, I'll need you.
just me, guys.
and then 6 silver play buttons.
Yeah.
I didn't realize you guys had that many channels.
Kind of branched out.
Yeah, obviously. You're like, let's do this 5 more times.
Exactly.
We are our
Gotta
own
keep up.
cluster.
Your own MCN, own network now. So I want to go back to the sibling, what's the right word? How you make decisions together. Because you grew up together, obviously, and it's not the normal narrative for today's society is that the siblings all go off, do their own I'll call it hyper individualism, which is kind of what we're raised in a normal American family, which is to pursue your dreams, be your own person. I'm not saying you guys aren't doing that, but normally what that looks like is you go off, get your education, do your own thing, and you kind of see your siblings at like holidays. And even then you're kind of like, whew, glad that's over. Like when it's done, right? So what is different? And I'm not quite sure what to poke at here. Is it something your parents did, or is it just something naturally, or what? How did that happen?
I think it's it's a combination of a bunch of things. I think our parents definitely really fostered that environment of like, oh, these are your friends, like you love your siblings, we're family, play with each other. Tyler and Gabriella were also very nice to us growing up. I think that's something that a lot of older siblings.
Who was nice to you, Tyler?
Tyler and Gabriella.
Yeah.
Like they're both very loving and affectionate towards us.
Our dad, for sure, like fostered, or my mom and dad, like that was like a very big decision, and that was partly why they decided to homeschool us. Was they felt like certain like school systems like just really like don't allow you to have that family unit, because you have your cliques, like like your siblings, if you see them there, it's like don't talk to me, and even just in terms of like what we were allowed to watch, if the show had siblings that fought too much in it, my dad didn't want us watching it. So we weren't allowed to watch Arthur, because DW and Arthur were so mean to each other.
And Bernstein Bears too?
We were allowed to read some of the books, but my dad would have to look through them to make sure.
Wow, interesting.
Certain episodes.
We weren't even allowed to watch that much TV.
They were very, very selective on that, because he just really wanted us to grow up together in like like Cole said, like that environment of like, hey, like your siblings are your best friends. Like, we don't treat each other poorly. Like, include them in what you're doing. Like, don't talk down to them. Like, so we definitely grew up with that like mentality of like, hey, like, we obviously had our moments where we're like, my friends are over. Like, you have to be in here with me like every second of the day. But for the most part, like, it was a balance of like when we had friends over, part of the time they'd hang out with us, and then they would know to kind of give us our space and then leave. Because we would have that balance.
Especially because being the youngest, I just obviously looked up so much to everyone. It's like I wanted to be like Tyler, I wanted to be like Gabriella, I wanted to be like Cole. So when they had friends over, like I just would be honestly like floored that they would let me hang out with them. Tyler and I have almost a 10-year age gap. So when they would have 10 years. So like I'm sure there's nothing more like that Tyler would rather do than have his 7-year-old sister come crash, you know, his friends. But it was definitely like my parents would kind of have that balance of like, okay, you know, you get to hang out with them for 15 minutes, you know, like.
Oh, okay.
We had a trampoline in the backyard, and like it was big kid time, you know, and then like
we forgot about that big kid time.
and then like, you know, my dad would come out and be like, hey guys, like big kid time, you gotta come in, you know, and it was like I just knew that's
you're
what
like
it was. So I
fulfilled,
wasn't right. Like I'm like, okay, well I got, you know, 15 minutes to jump with them, and that was amazing. I got to hang out with the cool kids.
And it was so funny because our friends were all bewildered that we all got along so well. Like every single friend was in awe. Like they were always very jealous of it. Like they were like, I wish my siblings got along as well as you guys do. And like they would come over and they would know that like to expect Eden and Cole to be like making an appearance, like hanging out, and like they would love it. Like they'd be like, that's so cool that like your family's so close.
I also think it helps too. Our family is massive on both sides.
Like with cousins.
Oh, your
we have
extended
like
family?
36 cousins on each side of the family. Not
That all
including like
live
second
within a
cousins.
area.
So the family
wow.
was like always super, super strong growing up. Like family reunions, we would constantly
Sunday
be
dinners,
around
birthdays,
cousins.
like it was just a very like family dynamic heavy. Even my cousin and I were born 2 days apart. In the same hospital, like, you know, so we would
different rooms.
Different rooms,
They shared the
shared
rooms
a room
after.
up until labor.
Oh,
My
really?
mom and my
Yeah.
aunt.
Oh, interesting.
So it was like, you know,
at any given time, like even like when I would just have a friend over, odds are 2 or 3 of my cousins were also over, like hanging out with Eden and Cole. So it was just kind of like used to like being around so many people that like you kind of like love and like want to like help see like do a good job. So it was really cool growing up in that environment. And we always had like family dinners every night, and like that was also something
It's fine. Yeah, keep going. That's fine. I think that was a good reminder for me. I'm supposed to lead that session she's talking about in 10 minutes. Okay. I forgot about that. So thank you for the announcement. It sounds like an airport right now, though. Thank you, announcer lady. So what are some of the key principles or values that you think make it possible to work together now? Was it just that upbringing, or is there, because now you guys are more in the adult stage, things are different.
We definitely went through like a critical shift in how we work together, like Tyler was talking about, where we hit that point where Eden and I weren't, you know, necessarily as inspired or passionate about it at the same time. So if we didn't correct that, that could have been really damaging long term with our personal relationship. Like during that point, it was like very raw and emotional, and you know we were angry with each other, and we didn't know how to function really. So there was a lot happening there that we got past, and we fixed that. And I think, you know, one of the most important things was like learning to just set our egos aside and putting a line between siblings and when we're coworkers, because there wasn't really, you know, a difference when we're spending every single day together.
Yeah.
When we go home, like we were always siblings, and we just learned to be able to like turn that off and separate ourselves.
You can do that? Wow, that's impressive.
Yes. It took a long time, and we wouldn't have been able to be here like without being able to do that.
So you're saying like we have healthy boundaries in terms of like there's personal relationship, there's business relationship, and we're getting pretty good at not confusing the two.
Yeah, and I think a big thing too is like, for me in particular, you know, at the time criticism was kind of hard for me because I'm like, okay, you're my sibling, I don't care what you're telling me, like, you know.
Exactly, yeah.
And so, you know, Tyler comes along and says something, and you know.
And you can't fire me.
Yeah, exactly.
no one knows how to push your buttons like your siblings do.
Exactly.
Right. And so, you know, I think there had to be a little bit of a shift of like, hey, this isn't coming from me trying to annoy you. This is coming from a business standpoint. And again, like in a traditional job, you can't fight back necessarily.
Right.
And so I think there definitely was kind of that shift of like, okay, if Tyler comes in and critiques my work, it's not because he's trying to be an annoying sibling. It's because he's.
Is that your head talking though, or is that what you actually feel it now too, or?
Now I definitely do. Like now I definitely.
But that was
understand.
a pretty rough learning curve, I would assume.
I would say a like side eye roll in there, you know, kind of like, don't tell me what to do, you're my sibling.
Yeah.
You know, it was just like, it was an ego thing. So I definitely personally, I really understand, like, that's different than a sibling criticism. You know, like, that's not out of annoyance or...
Yeah, but that sounds to me like most people wouldn't push through it enough to get to that point where you even learn the lesson. They would be like, you keep criticizing me, I'm out. And they wouldn't get to the other side of where you're at right now.
Oh, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I think also too, like, behind everything, there has to be like a level of intentionality. And I think, again, a big theme over the course of our life is like Cole said, is for whatever reason, and maybe this was just instilled in our parents, is a really strong intentionality in everything that we do, and bringing that into even situations like this, where if you don't have that intentionality when you come up against some sort of, ego battling, it is really easy to just walk away from that. But I think we're also able to bring in this, like, no, we're going to actually fight through this painful experience.
But that's like something that, like, as soon as one person decides I'm not pushing through the pain, it kind of falls apart.
And we have had, like, and I think that's kind of, like, where it comes, like, the fact that we were siblings. Like, if we had been friends, some of the fights we've had over the years trying to grow the channel, because there's been times where, like, we were, like, we're not making any money. Like, by the time Tyler and I started to go full-time, there was, like, a dip where we were, like, this isn't working anymore. Like, we really need to change things, and we were having fights. If it were friends, we would have just stopped, because, like, there was nothing to really, like, we would have been like, well, I'll just do this on my own. Like, I will just do my own thing because it'll be so much easier than trying to get us all on the same page. But because we're siblings, like, there was enough of us that was like, we would have a big fight, people would storm out, they would rage quit, as we would say.
Yeah, that's what I'm picturing in my mind.
We would be like, we're not talking at all, and then we all leave, but we're all in the same house. So it's like, everyone get back in the family room. I don't care if we're still angry. We're going to figure this out.
But at that point, you could have been like, I'm moving out.
Yeah.
So you still stuck with it.
So,
it almost feels like it's like
it was like a magnet that just kept like drawing us back.
It almost feels like it's easier that we're family just because we don't have the option. I mean, if we ever sat down and we're like, okay, this isn't really working and we want to separate, but it's the family dynamic that is what pulls us back together.
Because like, we don't want to do this by ourselves. Like, that's the thing. It's like, it's so hard to do it together, but like we don't want to like have a success without our siblings and be like, so that's really what kind of like pushes us, like, frustrating as it was to kind of like keep coming back and like being like, okay, like we've made it a couple yards further, but like, like we're like really pushing and then like hit another wall, but it's like we can just keep on going, guys.
But we also talk about synergy a lot, where we're like, okay, we're at the point, especially now that we have this foundation, that we're able to utilize that. And Cole's super into music, where it's like we're able to actually throw our audience behind that and throw the marketing and ideas and stuff like that to try to help push that up. Or if Eden she really wants to do a fashion line, it's like, well, now we actually have the capital to be able to like bring that in, and we already have the resources from our sourcing to be able to make that happen. So
and
you guys are functioning like an actual family team,
and I think that's also important. Like you kind of spoke on it earlier, but the individuality, like each of us also have things that we just control 100%. Like when Tyler writes, Tyler's the only one writing, and he has final say on, whatever that final product is. When Eden does her social media, her fashion line, she has that completely. I have my music. Gabrielle has her.
So you guys respect like the responsibility and the authority.
Exactly, and that's kind of like where we like realized like we were like running up against like so many like butting heads, was that like we all had these different wants. And we just, like, those wants weren't being met with, like, what we needed. And so we did, like, we just kind of, like, sat down. We all just, like, wrote down what we wanted out of the company. Like, what we wanted in terms of, like, where we wanted to see the growth, what we wanted to see our role in. And then we were like, okay, from here, now we can be like, okay, like, let's structure this so everyone is getting what they want. And, then, like, it was, you didn't even realize. We're like, oh, I didn't realize that you wanted to be more in charge of the social media. Like, like, that's perfect. Like, you can step into that. And we also really did focus a lot on like self-growth. We read a lot of book developments on business side, but also on just kind of like the personal creative side. So we read the 5 love languages. We read the War of Art. We read
you guys put a lot of work into the relational development.
To kind of just like be able to like really better ourselves, so we can like work better to like together. So we have like book clubs within our business now. So like the next book we're about to read is Fix the Snacks.
Clockwork.
Oh, okay.
And Clockwork.
Yeah, I did Clockwork.
Yeah. So we're like, we're now at the point where we're like, okay, we have some more growing pains as we're bringing on more employees and like figuring things out. So we're like, okay, cool. Like, let's sit down, let's read, let's learn, and let's keep continuing on together.
The main question I have for you guys coming into this conversation that I was thinking is, as a dad with 7 little kids, I'm trying to foster an environment where they don't have to start businesses, but they could if they wanted to, right? So helping them with problem solving. With our homeschool curriculum, critical thinking is a big part of that. You know, it's not just like, here's how you pass the test, but this is how you need to think about
and
solving problems.
Absorb knowledge and actually learn how to learn things.
Yeah. And I don't have an idea in my head that, like, man, my kids need to go into business together one day. But the bigger principle of being like, but they can work well together.
Yeah. Right.
And that's what I want to hear from you guys, which you've been talking about, but I just want to hear it more on the advice side for me or any other dads or moms that will be listening who have kids who are like, how do I now create an environment where my kids could have the type of relationship and work ethic and skills needed to start a business, either individually or together, if they've decided that one day that would be, like, how do we even make that maybe a possibility that they could take if they wanted to?
One thing that I think of, and what I always kind of fall back to on my earliest memory of working together, was my dad a lot of times put us in situations that we had to work together for. So honestly, like, and it's, you know, it sounds so little, but he would do these projects once a week where we had to build something out of like specific material, and it was through our homeschooling thing, and it was kind of just like a fun little event. But I so vividly remember like building card towers together, like building our Halloween candy, and it was more Cole and I at the time, like our school. But just, he would put us in kind of these unique situations where it's like, hey, you got to figure it out. And, like, you got to, you know, like, if we wanted to paint a room or something, it was like, yeah, but you guys are painting it. Like, I'm not painting it. It's you guys
Did your dad get an eye roll from you? Or was that, like, something that you were like...
No, I think we were, like, pretty into it. I
Okay,
mean,
cool.
I think at that point we were just pretty, like, you know, we worked well together already.
Him letting us, like, he would let the, like... Again, the passion kind of drive it. So I just remember, you know, the number of times that we'd be like, it wasn't him saying like, you guys go paint your room. It was us, you know, looking at magazines. And I remember we had like a PB Teen magazine, and I was like, I wish my room looked as cool as the magazine, you know, does here. And he's like, okay, well, go do it. Like, you know, go.
Yeah.
And so then, you know, he drove us to go get the paint, but it was like, this is your project. Like, you wanted to like make your room look this cool. Like, you know, you can do it.
And not to say he didn't help us.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of wondering.
Yeah,
because
so we needed help. He was there, but it was very
letting, like the excitement.
It was
of
the
what we
nudge
wanted.
of just kind of like pushing us. You know, like he could have left it at, you know, like to Tyler's point, like, oh, I wish my room looked that cool. Like, oh, maybe one day it will. Like, no, it was like, okay,
Whatever
you want a
we
cool
wanted.
room, then go.
or
go
like,
make a
oh, I'll
cool
go paint
room.
it for you.
Right.
Right. Or
Yeah.
that exactly. Like, oh, what
So
do
did he
you
let
want?
you paint like it's a terrible job?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
And
we
then
had
our
tons.
room was
Our room is yellow, purple, and green.
it was because I remember it vividly. It was yellow. Like we had a 4-foot section of a wall and then a middle
trim.
baseboard.
A trim in the middle.
So the middle wall was yellow. The trim was neon pink, and then the rest of the wall was like this lime green color.
And you guys thought it was amazing
Oh,
at
we
that time.
loved
It was
it, like,
never,
we-
'cause we
and-
picked out
Your
the
parents are coming
colors.
with sunglasses on.
Exactly. But you know, like we were told that was our space and we could do what we wanted with it. So constantly, and we all were like, we would rearrange our rooms if we had a vision for it. My dad was, you know, like Cole and I wanted bunk beds because we wanted to, you know, have a shelf there. And it was, you know, that mentality of like, you can do it, you know, and even for money especially.
I was gonna say
Yeah, like growing up, well, money was very emphasized of like, you can make money at a young age. Like if you want to make money, you can. You can walk neighbors' dogs, you can mommy's help, you can do a bake sale. Like it was very emphasized. So even at a young age, we all were making, you know, not a lot, but we were making money as children.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
we didn't have allowance growing up.
Yeah, we
Like,
don't do that with our kids.
And
at all.
I remember I had asked my dad, because my friends all got allowances, obviously, because they had normal parents.
They don't even have to work for it, Dad.
No, like they literally were like, yeah.
They get paid to live with their parents.
Exactly.
I had asked my dad, and I was like, Dad, why can't we get an allowance? Because like all my friends do. And he was like, you're going to grow up one day, and there's not going to be someone who's just going to hand you money. And he's like, and I want you to learn that, so that way you can get creative and think of like how you can start making money. And I'm like 8 at this point, so
Yeah.
I'm like, okay.
You're like, what do I need
and
money for? You guys pay for everything.
So they would like, if we wanted like a special toy like at the like store, or we wanted to go for ice cream on a night that like they weren't offering for us to go to ice cream, they would like be like, you can save up for it and then like we'll go. So we had to get creative because they didn't pay us for doing chores either, because chores were a part of the family responsibility.
If you lived in the house,
we all contributed.
Yeah, you had to keep the house.
Our neighbors, though, would pay us to do their chores.
Yeah.
So we would rake leaves for them. We would, shovel snow.
Shovel snow in the winter.
Yeah, the lawn. I started mother's helping before I was old enough to babysit. And then once I could babysit, my parents, took me to babysitting classes. And so, I think by the time I was 11, I was like babysitter certified and became like the babysitter for the entire neighborhood. So from a very young age, I was making money, and they were definitely like helping, like, we did like the envelope systems of like, hey, like when you make money, like, it's good to put 10% to tithing, 10% to savings, like put like what into your like saving up for. So we learned, all of us from a very young age.
Physical envelopes, I assume?
Oh yeah,
I
like
had
the yellow envelopes.
I had a box and decorated each one if I was saving up for something. So I'd be like, new dress, and like, it'd be like all. But from a really young age, it really taught us, like, if you want something, like, it's okay to spend time working for it and then save up for it, and then you get to buy it, and then it feels so much better. Because when I bought my first laptop at like 13 years old, I was ecstatic because it was like $750, and I was like, I've never seen so much money in my life. Like,
my kids are like that with a $20 bill right now.
Exactly.
My oldest turns 12 today, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, today's her 12th birthday.
Oh, well, happy birthday.
Oh, she would love it if you guys see her today, just to be like, happy birthday. She's like, how'd you know? We do that with our kids, and it definitely makes them think before they spend their money too. And they're like, do I really want this? Because I know what went into getting this.
And it's funny because growing up, once my friends were in college, so many of them were so lost financially because they were I am working for the first time. I'm in school, like, I don't know how to manage my money. And I'm like, oh, like, I've been managing my money since I was, like, 11 years old. Yeah. And they just have no idea. And so, like, it's been so interesting, like, having these conversations, especially as, like, they've been graduating, getting full-time jobs and, like, all of that. Like, it was so interesting to see them really struggling with, like, how to manage money because they've never done it before.
Yeah. I also think, too, just to add here quickly, one of, I think, the biggest things for me growing up was cooking. Like, that was such a tactical thing for me, and it was so in control of what I wanted to do. Like, my dad would just be like, all right, what do you want to make?
Yeah.
We would, like, make meals for the whole family. Each of us actually would take
one night of
a
the week
certain
we
night, and we would plan it out. We would decide what cuisine we wanted, what the meals were, and he would help us grocery shop.
Yep.
But like we would be the chefs, and like my dad was like our sous chef.
Yeah.
But I think
Thing.
that's one thing that was like really beneficial for us.
We do that too, and if it goes bad, we still eat it.
Yeah. That's let me tell you. Okay, this is like
within reason.
Yeah.
Of course.
Not eating charred meat. Like,
so I was doing like this was my first time cooking a whole chicken in the oven. I was so excited. I was like, I'm gonna do like a rosemary butter chicken. I put it in the oven, and I'm taking the temperature, and I'm like, okay, 45 minutes, it's not done. Put it back in. Take the temperature again, and I'm like, 50 degrees, like that doesn't seem
Forgot
right.
that you turn it.
And so I put it back in, and then I'm like, it goes up to like 53. I'm like, what's happening? So eventually, I don't even remember what it got to, but I realized that the thermometer was on Celsius.
Oh.
And so really the chicken was at 240
It's one of those
degrees.
mistakes you do once in your life.
Exactly.
And you know what? We all sat there and we were like, this is some tough chicken. Like, it is
Chicken
tough.
jerky.
Yeah, but you know what? I'm like, well, you learn once and it never happens again.
Another thing that we grew up and like our friends didn't know how to cook, and we were all like bewildered. We're like, what do you mean you don't know how to cook? This is a basic life skill. You're in college and like you can't cook anything.
So it sounds to me what you guys, if I'm going to boil it all down to a principle, that might be so general, it's not helpful, which is that like your parents just enabled you to go do stuff and fail.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
Yes.
and they did. It wasn't like they weren't a safety net there for you, because it sounded
Absolutely.
like they would still help you if you needed it.
Yeah.
But for the most part, it was more of a maybe like a coaching type of thing.
Yeah.
Where they're like, okay, here's how you do it. All right, good luck.
Yeah.
Let me know if you have any problems.
Yeah, exactly.
It was like a very safe
do it.
space to be able
Yeah.
to like try things, and again, like you said, fail. Like that was like a big part. Is like they were like, sometimes you're gonna drop an egg and then get all the shells in it, and you just gotta throw it away and try again. Like like it's.
Shells are edible, by the way.
Really?
I know, because
I
I've
did
eaten
know
my fair
that.
share. Yeah,
I
we
did know
we have
that,
chickens.
actually.
Yeah, the chickens eat their own shells. But anyway, yeah.
So it just definitely was just that environment that they definitely really fostered in us, was that like one, the ability to believe in ourselves to do things. Like I think a lot of times like that was just the most powerful thing, was like, hey, we believe in you, so like you believe in you, and like go ahead and do it. And whether that was like something little or something really big, just knowing that they were kind of like there, like supporting us and like ready, like you can do this.
Yeah.
It was something we definitely carried throughout all of our years.
So one last question, and this is what I'm most intrigued by, is you guys said Tyler was nice to you guys growing up. How does that happen? Like where the younger siblings grow up and being like, my other siblings were nice to me. Maybe I'm picking on Tyler a little bit here, but it sounds like you guys all had a mutual respect. You can push through conflict. You can separate business from personal somehow. What advice would you give to parents who are trying to foster those types of relationships with their kids, especially if they have like one kid who's picking on other kids?
Yeah, well, you were the one who was nice to us.
Tyler, why were you nice to us?
I think I honestly, if I had to like give an honest answer, I think it's
Please.
probably a generational thing. I think it probably like started with my grandpa. I think he had a very strong family dynamic, and coming from the large family and what he tried to foster, I think it kind of trickles down, where it's almost like, he probably had a family that wasn't as close, then it was him. He tried to foster that to some extent. And then once that hit my mom and our immediate family, again, it was this intentionality of like, okay, family, family, family. I think when left to its own devices, I think society kind of pulls us apart. And I think it takes this idea of like, hey,
Like intention
yeah,
behind
let's
Yeah.
try and pull that together. And I really don't think there's any like secret sauce to it besides somebody deciding that's how it's going to be. And I really think
Did you decide, or your grandpa decide? Who
I
were
think
you
it
saying
was
decided?
the grandpa at first, and then my dad, and then I think likewise my
Well,
dad
and our mom.
Yeah, and our mom. But
Sure.
I think it came really strongly from our dad just deciding
Because
that.
also one thing with my dad too that always I admired was he really had us understand kind of the emotional side of how you treat people, and understanding like why you do something, where it come from, and like what kind of the reasoning
Why
of
you
it.
wanna be
Right.
nice.
There wasn't a whole lot of like because I said so, like like as like a reason for like why we had to do things. Like it was very much like we treat our siblings kindly because you would want to be treated kindly.
Well,
Like,
yeah,
what do
and
you feel
growing
sad
up-
if like it was reversed and like this was the feelings that you were feeling
all the
And-
time, like our
So
motto from my
helped you
dad.
kind of develop empathy.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
he always, the one thing to this day that has always stuck with me from my dad is treat people the way you want to be treated. Like that was, like he learned that mentality. And when I heard that, and really he broke it down, even if I came back and I was talking about a situation with a friend and maybe I was kind of rude to that friend, or, Cole, he would be like, okay, so is that how you want to be treated? Like if that were you in that situation and it was flipped, would you feel good at what just happened?
Maybe if you're gonna be honest, maybe this did happen.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not saying you're not honest, but like, was it like, yeah, but not right now, Dad. Not this time.
But there definitely
like,
times.
you're like, I want him to feel that way.
Yeah, I think there were times, but he just really fostered that in us of like you don't need to make people feel bad, and like there's ways to solve situations without people feeling bad about the outcome of it.
And I think too, they also, I think, at least for me growing up, was like the most important thing was that they did allow us to have our space. Like not every fight or like conflict like was resolved in that moment. Like if they could kind of see that like we were just very worked up in our feelings, they were just kind of like, okay, like we're just gonna take a beat, go ahead and hang out in your room for a little bit, like do your own thing, and then we'll come back in like an hour or two when everyone's like cooled off, and then we're gonna talk about what happened. And that really just like allowed like emotions to kind of like cool down versus like in the heat of the moment, if we were like really upset with each other, like no one wants to learn how to love each other right now when you're like, I literally
I'm glad
don't
you're
want to
hurting.
see
I
you
wish you
again.
hurt more.
Exactly.
Right, yeah.
I'm gonna step on your toe harder.
Yeah.
But once you've like calmed down and then you come back and be like, okay, like let's talk about this. And just kind of like allowing, like, you know, again, we talked earlier, like the big kid time, like allowing like the acknowledgement that like you don't have to be in charge of your siblings all the time. You don't have to hang out with them all the time. But it's great when you do. And like that's like really awesome to like work that in. Yeah. Versus like I think if they had forced us to 100% of the time to like always include them and always have to like be babysitting when we were hanging out, I think that would have put too much tension on the sibling relationship. So just like allowing like, hey, like this is you time. Like go ahead, go read in your room for a little bit. Like, and like we'll, you know, Eden's not gonna come in and bother you because like we shared a room up until like, you know, us being 10. So like, you know, just kind of allowing that space, but also like, you know, acknowledging the appreciation for like when we did like hang out as a unit.
I think also too, if I had to guess, a big part of it coming from like the how to do it or, you know, some sort of specific skill piece is our dad is a very good listener. And we have all over the course of our life had many, I mean, we can count specific times, had deep conversations
like
with him.
hour-long conversations where he just like really listens to like us just like ranting, and like, you know, we've all had our own ones about each other. We're like, I just can't, they're driving me crazy.
To this day, I mean, literally last week, I can say that like I've had.
Like we're going for a run, like, Dad. I need to talk about them.
I mean, like, and it truly is just like, it's so relieving to just feel acknowledged sometimes, and like someone's there to purely just listen and not make you feel right, wrong. Like they're just there. Like they're there for you to just rant and get it off your chest, and then you're like, okay, wow, that was really nice. Like,
and then you're like, I feel better now. I understand. Okay.
So it's like,
so I think just like really listening, and like, you know, I think sometimes, and like they obviously weren't perfect at it growing up. Like I feel like there were definitely times like as a kid where I felt like I wasn't being heard. Like I just need you to hear me right now. Like this is how I'm feeling, and it was just shrugged off. Like you're just like, hey, like, you know, like you're fine. Like, you know, like whatever.
Sure, not
like,
a big deal.
Right. And so, but I think, you know, on the majority of the side, they definitely did a great job. But there definitely were the times where I was like, no one's listening to me. This is how I feel right now.
So where are we at in the process of the parents starting a YouTube channel?
Oh, they have their own
parenting
Instagram.
channel.
They're on Instagram.
They got the blog. They're starting. It's like the Fairly Normal Vegan Couple, where they're like showing their vegan lives, their weight loss journey.
Oh, but not parenting tips and stuff?
Not parenting tips.
Oh, well.
Their vegan lifestyle.
They're gonna have 2 silver play buttons pretty soon here.
Exactly. So now they're the ones that are coming to us, being like, how do we optimize Instagram better? And like, you know, what do you think of this
come
post?
home from working all day from the studio, and then like I get home, I look a mess. Like we just filmed. My dad's like, "Can you hold my plate of hummus and pose with this?" I'm like, "Really? Right now? Like
they're
right
the influencers now.
Yeah.
They love it.
Yeah, cool. Well, thank you guys for the conversation.
Absolutely.
And guys are listening. I put links in the show notes to their channels. I'll try to find all of them, put them down there, and you guys can go check them out. So thanks, guys. Appreciate your time.
Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah.